Our guest now in the Toyota Solutions studio is a journalist with Rappler. Her name is Patricia Evangelista. She's based in the Philippines, and she's been speaking out about issues she cares about in the Philippines really since she was a teenager, but has most recently gotten international recognition for her reportage on the violent drug war under President Rodrigo Duterte. Thank you so much for joining us in the Toyota Solutions studio. Patricia, I did read your award-winning coverage, and it was really searing. And as a journalist myself, I thought what courage it takes to do this assignment and to speak to families of victims. What was it like for you day in and day out to be covering that story? Because it must have taken some time to gain trust and find sources.
Of course the families are scared, but because we come from the crime scene itself, we start with the crime scene, we're there with the body, and sometimes we're there even before the families get in. So it's terrible because it should be a private moment, but the cameras are there, and then you're there when the mother walks in and finds out her son is dead. And then she's looking, hoping it's not him. So it's either she's screaming or she's resigned to it. So we don't interview then. You shouldn't. You can't. So you go to the wake. Because we're Filipino and Catholic, the wake matters. And because they're very poor, they don't have funeral parlors. So it's the coffin in the living room. And you're sitting there with the family. And then they tell you he was a good boy. And that sometimes he was naughty. And sometimes maybe he used drugs. And they'll always say, but he didn't have to die. So every time it's a little too much for any of us as journalists. You think, how dare you think it's too much? Look at what they're going through. So we do it because we saw it. And you can't go any further than that, than find out more and then tell the story.
Within the sort of arc of your journalism career, what was it like to see that sort of raw violence up close? Had you been in those situations before, or was that new for you to be exposed to that?
Well, I've been covering trauma for the past 10 years. So we were at the center of typhoons. So that's the ring of fire. So it's typhoon after typhoon after typhoon. So you go from a range of 500 dead to 3,000, 6,000, that sort of thing. I think the difference with the drug war, the reason it's new, or at least more difficult than anything I or other people have ever covered, is that when you go post-disaster or post-conflict, you always come home. We don't come home from this. People die 20 minutes away. And on the night you decide to sit down and watch TV or whatever, you know someone's dying somewhere. And
it's continuing what has been described by a lot of international observers as extrajudicial killings, that there's no due process. And I don't want to go too in depth, but you should read Patricia's reporting at Rappler. It's terrific. I just wonder the risks to journalists of covering this story. I know that a lot of foreign journalists have also been covering it, but what's it like to have to, again, these are the communities that surround Manila, so it's close to you.
The arc of the government's attack is not physical. There are threats. There are death threats, there are rape threats, there are quite a lot of these, but they don't come from government. They come online, and the government is very sensitive to criticism. So right now, my company's license to operate has been suspended. We are in court. We have, there are accusations of cyber libel, tax evasion, being foreign-owned, CIA-owned, and quite a number of other things. Yes, our imperialist overlords. It is difficult to be a journalist now because Rappler is supportive, but there's still a chilling effect across all media industries because you know if you say something, it might ricochet back the next day to your company or to your Facebook page. Yeah. It could be anything. It's also hard for the many journalists who cover trauma, because we're still human before we're journalists.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
And yeah, you have to process it.
Yes, you do.
On some level. Has it affected you in ways that you did not expect?
I smoke 4 packs a day now.
Oh. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's fine. It's difficult. Yeah. Particularly I write in long form and it's narrative.
Yeah, so you really have to immerse yourself.
You have to immerse. It's the same rule of thumb as when you cover disasters. When they drown, you have to know enough to drown with them. So it's the same here. But the harder part is because you need to make people imagine. That
Yeah.
means you have to keep playing back and imagine with them and figure out the best way to tell the story. And in the hope that people will pay attention.
I promised you that we wouldn't just be dark and sad in this interview. Storytelling is part of the solution. You intrinsically know that. That's why you keep putting yourself out there, right?
I hope.
Yeah.
We can only hope. I mean, for a lot of us, the faith is in journalism itself.
Yeah.
That if you keep doing the job, if you keep telling the story, there is a record of what is happening now. There may be impunity now, but maybe someday. There may be some justice for some families. That's what they say. The families we talked to, are you filing a case? Are you going to do something? They said they'll wait. And in the meantime, the stories are there.
I looked you up on YouTube, and
no.
there was a very precocious teenage Patricia Evangelista speaking with quite incredible poise. I know I didn't have that when I was 18. Let's talk about the influences in your life and who sort of helped you find your voice. Or were you just always that kid who was confident?
I am never confident. I was terrified.
You just fake it because you're
I fake it till I
awfully
make
good
it.
faker.
Yeah. I'm always terrified. My knee was shaking back there. My hands are sweaty now.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
Okay, well then, I guess the question is, why do you do it?
The journalism, because I have to. And see, the writing is different from the speaking. The speaking is a corollary. You gotta do it to get the story out. But the writing is really what I do. The public speaking video you saw a long time ago was before I knew that I did not like public speaking.
But you're really good at it. Were your parents encouraging in that
We
regard?
like to read.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a family that like to read. And I
That's
guess
a huge
the
part.
colonial influence affected us quite a lot.
Not everything about the colonial influence was probably
Oh,
bad.
yes, I love the books. Absolutely. It was the reading. And let's see, influences.
Did you have favorite books?
Absolutely. Philip Pullman was amazing. I read children's books. That's the effect of the drug war and trauma journalism. You only read happy things.
Yeah.
So when things get bad, I watch.
You go into the fantasy world of Pullman.
Or Star Trek Next Generation.
Awesome. So you're into sci-fi fantasy
Yes,
stuff.
I am. But only with happy endings. I don't watch movies when I can't make sure it's a happy ending.
Isn't that true? I mean, after a tough day on the job,
Yes.
covering violence
Yes.
and conflict and disaster, all I want to do is watch like sitcoms, like
Yes.
Friends or
Absolutely.
old episodes of Sex
Watching
and the City.
Friends again, yes.
Have you met a lot of women here that inspire you and that have sort of
quite
fortified
a lot.
you to go
Particularly
back?
yesterday. I couldn't watch everything because I had just flown in. But the first speech itself, that was phenomenal. About the women holding back sex to end war.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And the way she stood up to power. I don't think journalists are the resistance because we're supposed to do the job. But women like her are absolutely inspiring.
There are a lot of activists here, and there are a lot of journalists. And I think I heard you say in one of your talks, you referenced the difference. And I have this debate all the time with my journalist colleagues, whether we consider ourselves activists or journalists. I probably disagree with you on this. Like I'm one of those that tries to stay objective, but you have an opinion on.
I don't believe anything is subjective. I think the choice of what beat to cover is already a function of your personal bias. I choose trauma reporting. I could cover lifestyle. I could cover the environment, and it would just be as legitimate. I believe the framing of your sentences or your questions is already a function of whatever filter is there. However, I don't believe journalists are advocates. I think that we need to be loyal to the facts, but we don't have to be neutral. Because the reason we cover terrible things is because we know they're terrible.
Yeah.
And we say it shouldn't be happening. So,
And that in and of itself is a sort of activism. I agree with you
Yes.
on that. I wonder if in the Philippines, I know that there have been a lot of comparisons between Duterte and Trump, definitely in style and in sort of brazenness of rhetoric. But have there been sort of the fake news attacks on the media in the Philippines that we're seeing here?
my name is Patricia. I work for Rappler. We are fake news. Or
You
at
are.
least that's how it's
That's
said.
the charge.
Yes, that's the charge. So whatever reporting we do, no matter how many sides we get, no matter if you have a witness, the face, the documents,
The photos.
the photos, we are fake news.
How have you grappled with that? I mean, that's a very insidious charge
It
when
is. You
fact-based
can't
journalism
fight
is
against
attacked.
it. Yeah.
When fact itself is on trial these days, even like the facts that we can visibly ascertain.
You just do the journalism, and I think
you
you
just
just
keep
keep
doing
doing a better job and try doing better. It's just you're supposed to do a good job anyway, and you're supposed to try harder. And if you want to be hopeful, I guess it inspires us to try harder.
You know, on the plus side, I always feel like I've covered a lot of natural disaster as well. I always find like that's where you see the greatest part of humanity as well.
Yes.
Have you noticed that? And that it can be, you know, we've talked obviously about how difficult it is for you to cover the drug war. But I found that in a lot of these cases, you see the best parts of people.
Absolutely.
Have you found that?
Absolutely. Like they'll say they're looters, for example, after a disaster, and it's true, and you can't blame them. They need to eat. But you'll have looters digging up stuff for the old ladies who can't get out of the house, for example. You have Robin Hoods.
Yeah.
And then you'll have men who are looking for the bodies of their wives or their sisters or their daughters. And while they're doing that, they're carefully wrapping the bodies of their neighbors' kids.
The dignity of
The dignity of the death, and the fact that at your worst, you still care about the other person.
Yeah. Do you think you'll continue with journalism? Is this how, do you have any other plans in the next 10, 15
No,
years?
this is it. I have to. And the worse it gets, the more we need to be journalists, I think.
Patricia Evangelista, it's such a pleasure to meet a young journalist of your degree of grit and courage. It's inspiring to those of us in the older generation that have become very cynical.
But there are a lot of journalists in the Philippines. I'm not the only one who is covering and who's doing work like this.
Thank you so much for joining us in the Solutions
Thank
Studio.
you very much.